I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's News Update. Israel's Vice Premier Shalom said this morning that he believed Israeli-Palestinian peace talks would be renewed soon, but without preconditions. Mofaz said, "I have a firm basis for believing this will happen in the near future." Mofaz made the comments to Israel Radio from Washington, D.C., where he's in the midst of high-level talks. He met yesterday with members of Congress regarding Iran and also with U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Clinton had met earlier that day with Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat, who reiterated the Palestinian preconditions of stopping all settlement building in the West Bank. Mofaz stated the demand of a settlement freeze was the main obstacle to restarting the peace talks, suggesting an interim agreement on borders and security arrangements that would ultimately lead to a permanent agreement. Mofaz said the solution is to make compromises, but not on the security of the State of Israel. Israel's Defense Minister Ehud Barak spoke to the Keshev Committee today. They are tasked with finding a solution to the Tal law. Barak said that 50% of ultra-Orthodox men of military age should be drafted into the IDF, with the remaining recruits going into national or civilian service programs. Barak said exemptions for religious studies would be granted to a maximum of 10%. Barak said this solution would create a more equal share of the burden of service, as well as increase the size of the workforce in Israel. Barak called the ultra-Orthodox community an essential element in the mosaic of Israeli society and the link of the state and the Jewish people to its roots. The Tal law had exempted the ultra-Orthodox from military service and was ruled as unconstitutional by Israel's High Court earlier this year. A member of the Women of the Wall group was detained by Israel police today for wearing a male talit or prayer shawl. The police said that according to a negotiated compromise, women are only allowed to wear a female talit, which are multicolored and are draped around the neck like a scarf. Chairwoman of Women of the Wall, Anat Hoffman, said that she was unaware of any agreement related to the acceptable styles of wearing a talit. Jerusalem police spokesman Shmuel Ben Ruby said the police asked the woman, who was part of a group of 65 women praying, to remove the men's talit, which is the traditional black and white. And after she refused, they detained her for questioning. According to a 2001 law, it is illegal for women to perform religious practices traditionally done by men in Orthodox Jewish practice at the Western Wall, such as reading from a Torah scroll or wearing a talit, because it may offend the religious sensibilities of others. The Anti-Defamation League has condemned the recent arson attack of a West Bank mosque, which Israeli authorities believe was done by Israeli Jewish right-wing extremists. ADL National Director Abraham Foxman stated that the attack on the Jabba Mosque and other recent similar incidents against mosques are fundamentally an affront to the values of Israel. Further saying, "We share Prime Minister Netanyahu's outrage that this was the work of intolerant, irresponsible lawbreakers." Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu had condemned the attacks and attackers earlier and promised to act quickly in bringing them to justice. The mosque, located in the Palestinian village of Jabba near Ramallah, had been set on fire several days ago. Graffiti was also spray-painted on it with the words Ulpana War in Hebrew, referring to the West Bank outpost, which is set to be demolished July the 1st. The mosque was lightly damaged as a result of the attack, and an investigation is ongoing. The National Council of Jewish Women submitted its formal comments this week with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, urging the Obama administration to revoke the refusal clause that exempts religious institutions, namely houses of worship, from covering contraception. While the organization celebrated the fact that the pending regulations include contraception coverage in all new insurance plans, they expressed their concern about the exemption, saying it should be revoked or at the very least kept narrow and limited. Earlier this week on Shalom TV, we reported that the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America urged that the religious exemption be expanded to cover institutions beyond houses of worship. Speaking to Shalom TV, NCJW President Nancy Kaufman said that while the NCJW recognizes that religious leaders have a right to preserve the identity of their organizations, religious institutions have also long been required to follow certain civil rights laws, further saying that the refusal clause in the preventive care rules would deny individual women their rights in favor of protecting institutional doctrine. The National Council of Jewish Women is a grassroots organization that strives for social justice by improving the quality of life for women, children, and families, and by safeguarding individual rights and freedoms. And finally, today is the anniversary of one of the most important events in the fight for civil rights in America. On this day in 1964, civil rights workers Andrew Goodman, Mickey Schwerner, who were Jewish, and James Chaney, who was African American, were murdered in Neshoba County, Mississippi, by members of the Ku Klux Klan. The three were part of the Freedom Summer campaign aimed at getting as many African American voters registered as possible. Over 1,000 volunteers, many of them Jewish, came down to Mississippi to work alongside thousands of African American volunteers. Goodman and Schwerner were from the New York area. Chaney was from Mississippi. The three were working together investigating the recent burning of a church when on their way back they were stopped and arrested for an alleged traffic violation. After they were released, they were stopped again by 2 carloads of KKK members who shot and killed them. May their memory be blessed. And that's Shalom TV's news update. I'm Teisha Bader.